On April 16, 1927, a levee of the Mississippi River broke, starting a chain reaction of flooding that would change voter demographics in the United States for years to come. The biggest flooding tragedy of the Mississippi actually started in 1926, when heavy summer rains caused the Mississippi River to swell up in the spring and flood its banks. This kind of flooding is normal for the Mississippi, as snow from previous winters and excess rain cause an annual cycle of flooding around April. However, the flooding that happened in 1927 was anything but natural. That year, the river swelled until it reached the capacities of the levees, or walls built to hold in high levels of river water, around it. Mississippi's Corps of Engineers had built the levees and ensured those living around the Mississippi River that they would hold in that year's floodwater. They were wrong. Once the first levee burst on April 16th, it only took a couple of weeks until 144 more breaks caused the entire levee system to fail and the floodwaters to rise. The effects of the flooding on human life were catastrophic. In total, 23,000 square miles of land were flooded, and 640,000 people were displaced from or lost their homes. It is estimated that between 250 and 1,000 people died in the floodwaters, and African American communities bore the brunt of the hardship. At the time, many African American communities were located close to the Mississippi River's edge, where families would work together in agriculture. When the floodwaters rose, white women and children would be taken to safety, but African American workers were left behind. After the flood had hit, more than 200,000 African Americans were placed in relief camps with very little food or water rations and forced to help clean up the aftermath of the flooding. This extreme mishandling of flood relief efforts helped spur the Great Migration of African Americans from the rural South to more urban areas, and even helped shift the minority vote demographics away from the incumbent Republican Party and President Calvin Coolidge and towards the opposing Democratic Party. The monumental nature of the flood of 1927 was attributed not to the natural causes that often cause river flooding, but to human meddling with the environment. Deforestation in the Midwest, mowing under prairie grasses in the West, and the drainage of wetlands all removed vegetation that acted as natural barriers to slow water from entering the Mississippi. With this vegetation gone, there was nothing to stop large amounts of rainwater from flowing freely into the river at unnatural speeds. In addition to the removal of this vegetation, poor levee construction and the absence of outlets or spillways where river water could expand to if needed also led to the disastrous nature of the 1927 Mississippi River flooding. At the time, the Corps of Engineers tried to purposely burst levees above towns to protect them from rising floodwaters, a mitigation method still used in times of disastrous flooding today. However, since the 1927 flood, the Corps of Engineers has added 3 floodways where the Mississippi can expand to if needed. These levees and floodways help protect citizens living in the fertile valleys close to the Mississippi's edge from disastrous rising waters. But in the future, these mitigation methods may not be enough. Global warming and the increased precipitation it brings may cause the river to overflow disastrously again, exceeding the capacities of the levees and spillways that were built with the precedents of past flooding in mind. As increased urbanization brings about changing land patterns and the disappearance of even more vegetation, the fate of those communities living near the river becomes even more worrisome. We can only hope that any floods the Mississippi will face in the future are nowhere near as disastrous as the Great Flood of 1927.
Created using Powtoon.